Hi, today I'm telling you or talking to you about how you can use your swatch as your instructions, because it's not always convenient to take a big book around, or it's not convenient to pull up your app. So I have made a swatch from a row blanket instructions that I'm going to work with you guys on with the Summer of Babies 2020. This is the baby blanket that we are making. And while I'm in process making it, I wanted to share some tips, not only for this blanket, for the nostalgic blanket, but also how to use your swatch as your instructions. So what I did was, first thing I did was I made a swatch. So I took the multiple from the book. And I hear my cat bouncing around behind me. I made one full repeat of stitches, making sure I had it exactly right, matching it step by step so that I know this swatch is correct. So now I know that the ending of each row and the beginning of each row are exactly what I need for my blanket. So I made the swatch in one color because my blanket was going to be in one color, but I thought to teach you guys, I also went ahead and made it in 3 colors so that you can see how each row looks differently. So what I did was I made sure it exactly matched the instructions. So this is a tiny blanket for a Barbie doll, maybe a Barbie doll bed. And it's just 3 repeats of the stitch pattern, and then 1 complete repeat of the sequence of it's actually 18 rows for the pattern. And then row 19 is exactly the same as row 1, only you're working in stitches here for row 19, and row 1 you're working in the foundation chain. That's the only way that row 1 and row 19 are different. So when I'm working this pattern, but for any pattern that you want to take on the go, make your swatch. Make it a really good swatch. Make sure it's exactly correct so that you can use it as a reference. Well, guess what? I don't need to carry my book around with me anymore to make this blanket if I'm going somewhere and want to work, or even if it's on my lap. I don't want a big book. I don't want the pages flipping. I don't want the bookmarks. I don't want to turn the corner on my pretty book. I have my swatch now, which is my instructions. Also, you can photocopy your swatch. So I took this swatch, this actual piece of fabric, and put it on my photocopier. I turned the contrast up a little bit, and it is now my instructions. So I can write on this if I want to. So I can put down here, I don't have a marker handy, but I can write, okay, this is row 1, and this one is row 2. This is row 3, and this is row 4. I can make a note as I'm working. Oh, this row looks like it's going to be tricky. Pay attention to that. That's actually 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so you can make notes. I can also write, oh, I'm using an eye hook, and I'm using the mauve Barocco weekend. So that's the yarn that I'm using. I'll put the link in the description below. But anyway, you can make notes on your photocopy and just take this with you. You can also count. So at the end of the row, then when you're like actually making your project, let's see, this is the wrong side, this is the right side. When you're actually making your project and you're like, oh, I want to make sure, without counting all 111 or whatever number of stitches, you can just look at the ends and say, okay, row 1 has 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Row 2 has a gap and a 1. That looks the same. Look, there's no gap at all and a whole bunch of stitches, and that matches there. Look, okay, maybe I'm confused about row 15. So I can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 has 2 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 has 2 stitches. Okay, I'm right on target. So if you want to check your work as you go, then you can check your swatch. You can either check your actual swatch, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Oh, look, 2 stitches. Or you can choose look at the photocopy to checks and balances your work. Okay, so while you're going along your pattern, First of all, you can eyeball this particular pattern and make sure your eyelets are lining up. If they like suddenly jog off, you know you made a mistake somewhere. But for this pattern, the hardest part is just making sure whether you've got the edges correct. So I have one complete repeat in a swatch that I can look at it and make sure it matches before I move on to the next row. So it's a checks and balances. Or I could look at my photocopy if I don't have my swatch with me. And I can make notes on my photocopy. Oh, okay. If I know that this is 18 rows and this one is row 19, it's the same as a row 1. Actually, the 19 would be over here because the odd numbers are on this side and the evens are over here. Then I know that row 20 is here, 20. And then this becomes 21, this becomes 22, 23, etc. So you can write on your photocopy. So when you get really deep into your pattern and you're on row like 35 and you're like, oh no, my swatch, my paper only went to 35. Well, you know, this one's 19. So, you know, 20, because 19 is the same as 1. So 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35. 35 should look like this row. It should end like this and it should start like this. So you have this as a reference and you can write on your paper all the rest of the rows if you feel like you need them. Do you see what I'm saying? Please let me know how you're doing and whether or not that feels good to you. You have any questions about this? So I want to hear your story and your struggle with this stuff. The other tip is on your photocopy, if you're using a photocopy, you can advance up by using a sticky note on the row. So if I'm working on this row next, I'm going to put the sticky note underneath it so that I know that this is the row that I'm on. And then when I get to the next row and I turn and go back, I'll move the sticky note up a row and go back. And then I'll move it up a row and go back so that I know at a glance where I am in my pattern without having to count rows every time. So put a sticky note as a reference for where you are. Now on your actual piece, once I get to row 19, like I can't put a sticky note on my piece, but what I can do is I can put a stitch marker. So I have 19 rows on my piece here, and actually, yeah, 19. This is the 19th row. It's exactly the same as row 1. I can look at it visually and make sure that I'm on my right track. I can compare it to my photocopy. I can compare it to my swatch. I can compare it to my colored swatch. The colors just help you know which row you're on. If you need something that breaks it up visually a little bit, you can be like, oh, I just did a pink row, so I know the blue row is next. So you know you're sort of where you are in the pattern. But also for teaching purposes, it's easier to see when the rows are different colors. Anyway, okay. So what I was saying is, if I know row 19 is the same as row 1, and that's when I like start over again, then I'm going to place a stitch marker on the row 19 or also the row 1 of the pattern. So when I progress through more rows of this nostalgic baby blanket on the Summer of Babies, then I know this is row 1 because it has the marker. So it should look like this row. My next row should look like row 2. And the row after that should look like row 3. And I will leave the stitch marker there. And you can also use a coilless pin if you want to, or, you know, tie a little contrasting piece of yarn around that stitch so that you know, and then take them all out when you're done. But I would leave them there so that I know, okay, here's a row 19, which is a row 1. And when I go all the way up to the next one, I'll see, oh, well, there's another stitch marker. So I did another whole sequence of 19 and then another stitch marker until I'm finished with my blanket and I can see how many repeats of the complete pattern it took to get to the length that I want. So I think these are some fun little tricks that maybe you haven't seen before for how to read instructions, especially if you're a visual person. So how to use your swatch to help you as you go. I hope you've enjoyed these tips and I will see you next time. Bye.